I do want to touch, too, on what we saw yesterday, which was just remarkable. And the words from this judge remarkable. Allow me to read some of this. So this is a judge who learns in the middle of this hearing that two of the people they're there to talk about are at that moment in time on a plane being sent back to El Salvador. This is pretty outrageous, says District Judge Emmett Sullivan. Somebody in pursuit of justice who has alleged a credible fear in her mind and is seeking justice in a United States court is just spirited away while her attorneys are arguing for justice for her. It's outrageous. I'm really upset about that. And he also said if they weren't brought back, he was maybe going to hold the attorney general in contempt. It's remarkable to see this. And it also, I would imagine, Van, is not the last that we're going to hear about it.
No, listen, you're seeing a big conflict now around key questions around the rule of law in the United States. There is a law in the United States that, frankly, most Americans have been quite proud of that says if you are fleeing persecution, you have a right to come to the United States and at least be heard. I'm afraid, I'm scared. Doesn't mean we have to take you. No. Doesn't mean anybody who shows up can stay. But everybody gets a say, gets their moment. And we fought for that, not just here, but around the world. It's one of the biggest achievements in the last century in terms of human rights law. And this administration and Jeff Sessions says, I just don't care. I don't like that law. I don't like those people. I'm going to do what I want. This is the top cop. Sessions is supposed to enforce the law. He's flouting the law, and our courts are having to point out to him, by the way, sir, you have to obey the law. The top cop has to obey the law. That's now a controversy in America. This is so outrageous that we're back to literally 11th grade civics, whether or not everybody has to follow the law. That's where we are at this moment.
I have to say, you note that Jeff Sessions is doing it publicly. He's proud of this.
He's not.
Stephen Miller, the key advisor on immigration issues inside the White House, is doing this publicly. He's proud of this.
And lawlessness. This is lawlessness from the top.
It's not just an issue of the law. It's also a question of what is America. And there are also people who support the president on cable television who are saying things publicly. They're not hiding. They're saying it out loud. And Laura Ingraham, who's a host on Fox News, had this to say the other night.
In some parts of the country, it does seem like the America that we know and love doesn't exist anymore. Massive demographic changes have been foisted upon the American people. And they're changes that none of us ever voted for and most of us don't like. From Virginia to California, we see stark examples of how radically, in some ways, the country has changed. Now, much of this is related to both illegal and, in some cases, legal immigration that, of course, progressives love.
So Laura Ingraham tried to backtrack it away overnight, saying it was about the border.
She didn't say a word. No, listen, I know her. I have thought well of her in the past. That was racial. Listen, if she wants to talk about the border, she wants to talk about security, if she wants to talk about terrorism, she wants to talk about any of those things, she's welcome to do that. She did not mention any of that stuff. In that thing, she talked about demographic change, period. It doesn't matter if you're smart, if you're good, if you're law-abiding, whatever. The demographics, the racial demographics are the issue. There's no other explanation for the word demographic. And so that does not sound like anything but white nationalism. And I don't like coming out here and saying that kind of stuff because I always look for a better explanation if I can find it, and you know I do. There is no other explanation for her comments than she's talking about the changing racial makeup. Now listen, conservatives always tell me, we're colorblind. We don't see color. Why do you guys always raise the issue? She raised the issue with no even pretense that there was some other dog whistle. This is, you're seeing now mainstream media adopting the rhetoric and the rationale of white nationalism, and nobody's doing anything about it. This is one of the worst things I've seen on cable television.
Michael?
I think it was one of the most cogent articulations of a viewpoint that exists among Trump supporters that explains his election in 2016, the unsettled nature in some people's minds that Van is describing as to the changes that they see in the country. I see it in stark political terms. Laura Ingraham's articulation is what explains, I think, the way in which states like my own in Pennsylvania and other Rust Belt, Michigan, Wisconsin states, Ohio, ended up going for Trump. People that she's speaking to are worried about the changing complexion of the country, what this country will look like in 2040, if not sooner. I don't agree with it. I don't agree with it, but I appreciate, in a sense, the way, okay, it's now out in the open. And let's talk about what really drives some of these voters.
And my point about it is, up until now, they've tried to pretend that it's other issues, more noble issues, more issues you could maybe understand. Well, we're concerned about terrorism or gangs or something like that. So you can say this is all about safety, which is where she tried to run. But if we're going to literally now have the conversation, we just don't like having more brown people around. We just think having more brown people around makes us feel weird and bad. Then let's have that conversation. But you can't then say that and then turn around and say, every time a black or brown person says, I feel like there's racism here, you're playing the race card. I think you got to pick your lane. You either the country is beyond racism, we don't care about color anymore, and it's the progressives making the issue, or actually, progressives are right. We don't like you here, and we're going to defend the fact we don't like you here. But you can't have it both ways.
I think also, too, in that, and this really is part of what both of you are saying, but in terms of this changing demographic and that things look different, which is what she's pointing out, you can't ignore the fact, too, that she's tying it to both legal and, in her words, illegal and, in her words, legal immigration.
Legal, yeah,
and that's where we need to, like, as you're saying, as you're bringing this all back together, this comes back to more people from Norway. This comes back to, I want people who are better, without actually taking a look at not only, forget where people are coming from for a minute. How about taking a look at the measure of the person and what they may need? And, do they need asylum, what they have to offer, all of these things, and all of that, too, getting lost in this conversation, which becomes about these gut moments that are truly the worst of this country.
Sarah Seidner.
But it's, Erica, if I could just say this, it's really not immigration that is changing the nature and character of the country as she articulates it. If you really want to talk about how America will be, whites will be minority in 2040. I said that incorrectly. How the country will be comprised of whites who are now in the majority by 2040. It's more about birth rates than it is about immigration. So this is a canard on which Laura Ingraham is playing.
Yeah, and throughout the West, you're seeing this challenge where, once you get that Western standard of living, you don't want to have a bunch of kids. You tend to have, one or just have a dog, and then that tends to have a certain outcome. So
sometimes they're a lot easier.
Yeah, sometimes they are. But listen, I thought that we crossed another line with that commentary. Sarah Seidner had recently just went out into some of the tough parts of America and heard Nazis saying this very point.
We have that sound band. Let's listen to it.
Yeah, okay.
Rural America spoke up when they elected Trump. Rural America. We're staring down the barrel of a gun here in white America. There's still 193 million white Americans. Yes, the vast majority of them are in their 60s and 70s, will be in the ground in the next 20 years, and therefore we have the possibility of becoming a minority in our own country. A possibility.
It sounds to me
of becoming a minority in our own country.
Like you're afraid of being me. And being me,
this is my country,
is great. This is also my country.
You guys didn't win the culture war.
So you have a guy who's, if you didn't notice that, he has a Nazi swastika on his chest, making the same argument that Laura Ingraham was making on cable television to millions and millions of our neighbors and fellow citizens. There is no difference between the argument that the Nazi made and the argument that she made, that having too many brown people is a problem. Not because they're criminal, but because they're brown. Not because they're terrorists, but because they're brown. Not because they did anything, but literally just because they're brown. There is no other way to describe that argument than racist. I don't come on this station and call people racist. I find any area I can to give people credit. I'd rather have a more dignified debate. But that is racism, period, and point blank. It doesn't matter if it's coming from a Nazi standing in front of his trailer or from Laura Ingraham on Fox News. If you say people coming here are a problem because of the color of their skin, because of where they came from, that is racism, period, point blank. And it has no place in our country. I agree that it's good that it's out there. But then now let's finally have the conversation. Is somebody absorbing too much light through their skin a problem? Is that a crime? Is there something wrong with that? Or is there something more important about that person, about that child, about that father, about that mother that we might want to remind ourselves to look at? Because I'm raising children in this country. And kindergartners are taught better than Laura Ingraham. Third graders, kids going to college are taught better than how Laura Ingraham and that Nazi are performing in our country. And it's wrong. And if we can't say that it's wrong, to say that somebody shouldn't be here literally just because of the way they look, we are far down the rabbit hole in this country.
Michael Smerconish, jump in here. I just want to note that Melania Trump, the First Lady of the United States, her parents became U.S. citizens yesterday through the legal immigration,
through chain migration,
the legal immigration process, and I have not heard the same concerns about the impact of immigration.
There's new data out yesterday from Pew Research, and it delves into turnout among those different constituencies who participated in 2016, and it also scrutinizes those who didn't come out to vote. I highly recommend it. But what I took away from it was the level of passion that existed among some communities, some white communities, that didn't exist among people of color. And I would say, I view this all in political terms. I think we're now discussing a large part of the success that Donald Trump had in 2016 in driving his core constituency. And I'm not castigating all those who supported him, far from it. But I think herein lies an explanation as to why forecasters, pundits didn't see coming the outcome of that 2016 race. And so I welcome the dialogue. I really do. I have felt this coming for a long, long time from certain callers in my radio constituency, the unsettled nature as to what this country will look like from a demographic standpoint in the next 40 or 50 years. So now it's laid bare. Let's discuss it.
Michael Smerconish, Van Jones, I want to thank you both for coming in and having this discussion this morning. I really appreciate it.